While the press is waiting for Brandon to arrive, he comes in very late and no apologies. Let's get started. Please like, comment, and share to help spread the word. Stay to the end for interesting reactions of the mayor.
Well, good morning, you all. Thank you for joining us today. It's always a great pleasure of mine to be able to present to the people of Chicago what we've been up to and the work that we have done collectively to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. So we're going to talk community safety in our mid-year update. And I want to thank you all again for joining us. We have a few people here really quick that I want to just make sure everybody knows. We have our acting comptroller, Mike Belsky, is with us. My chief of staff, Christina Pasion Zayas, and then our deputy mayor for community safety, Gary and Gatewood. As we reach the mid-year point, we wanted to give you all an update on the progress that we are making and building on, again, the safest, most affordable big city in America. Some of you may have seen this article that was printed in the Tribe. It exposed the groups that are sending out misinformation about crime, and they're sending this misinformation out to Chicagoans. The Urban Center PAC has been sending these messages to confuse Chicagoans, particularly in the 12th, 26th, 30th, 33rd, and 35th wards.
Reported crimes. Keep that in mind.
The texts claim that violence is rising in Chicago. However, when the organization was pressed on this, they agreed that the quote more is accurate, that crime is actually down in Chicago. In the 26th ward, where some of these text messages were sent, the article actually reports that there's been only one homicide in the 26th ward for these first 6 months. As I've said repeatedly, one homicide or one shooting is one too many. However, this is substantial progress, and we need to make sure that Chicagoans understand the reality of crime and violence in their neighborhoods. The PAC is a separate from this dark money PAC that the Tribune reported on in May, but they've raised $10 million to confuse Chicagoans.
Chicagoans are not confused about what they see and hear on a daily basis. Chicagoans knows what's going on in their neighborhoods.
Even more about our progressive agenda as we work to bring down crime and increase affordability in the city of Chicago. This is also separate from another PAC that was reported in the Sun-Times last year, which formed a so-called vision to raise millions of dollars to oppose my agenda, my progressive agenda.
Progressive agenda? To rake mid-income hard workers through the coals for increased revenue? To upcharge higher earners for the same city services? While many low-income residents that commit driving violations get fee waivers to break laws and not pay for traffic violations as a permanent solution and hopefully give you their vote. Oh, that progressive agenda.
That's drawing and driving crime down, and my progressive agenda that's building more affordability. The purpose of this PAC in part is to support really a more conservative mayoral candidate in the future.
Very well. Past time for change. Turn it conservative and bring back biblical principles. Pastor's son.
Still several years away from the election season, this is what this PAC is up to. And as you can see, there are millions and millions of dollars being spent to spread lies and misinformation about the work that we are doing.
Lies
so
and
let's
misinformation?
Talk about the reality. The reality is that the Chicago Tribune reported this weekend that violent crime is down to levels not seen in at least a decade in our city. This is a very direct quote. The steepest statistical drop in recent memory, with fewer than 200 homicides in the first 6 months of the calendar year for the first time in more than a decade.
Remember, reported.
So year to date, let's look at the numbers again. Homicides are down 32%. Shootings are down almost 40%. Robberies are down by over 33%. I don't know if we have the numbers up there, but shooting victims are down. I believe that number is 40%. But let's talk about the why. That's what's most important here. We can identify a few key reasons why we've seen this decline under my leadership. Our police department has done an effective job at deploying resources effectively, solving and clearing more cases, and rebuilding trust with residents through constitutional policing. When I first took office, we looked at the 35 most violent beats in the city, where violent crime was pervasive, where disinvestments have been the prevailing form of governance. My theory of the case was pretty simple. If we can drive violence down in the most violent neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, we can take that effort citywide. And that work has been moved citywide. Our police department continues to do its job, and particularly, again, our detectives division, which I promised to hire 200 more detectives, as well as revamp the detective division to ensure that we are using more modern technology and better efforts to be able to solve violent crimes in the city of Chicago. And we're going to take that same effort to begin to solve the shootings. It's not just about solving homicides. It's about solving every single violent act in this city, because we see that as a deterrent. But something else that we're very proud of is our CVI, Community Violence Intervention. These groups have played an important role as well, spreading out throughout the entire city of Chicago. They understand and know the nature and the makeup of these communities, and they're able to better offer intervention and prevention strategies that ultimately provides for more safe communities. And our investments in people, it's paying off. When we see that these three elements are working together in neighborhoods, we have seen a dramatic reduction in violent crime categories. Our police are targeting the areas, again, that have been most affected by crime and violence. When we've identified those 35 beats, it provided more confidence, quite frankly, in the community, that we were going to show up for them and that these communities would never be ignored again under my administration. Our restructured Detectives Bureau, again, solving more cases, bringing clearance rates to some of the highest rates that we've seen in a decade. I believe this year alone, the clearance rate is 80% or 81%. And so have we seen the largest jump in the consent decree compliance as well since the monitor was put in place in 2019, which is proof positive that our efforts to ensure constitutional policing are effective. But we've also seen, again, this unprecedented partnership with CVI, street outreach workers, this partnership with the state of Illinois, Cook County business community as well. We're bringing people together and resources together to drive violence down in the city of Chicago. And these are the people who are on the ground that are actively de-escalating conflicts before someone gets shot. And we've expanded the partnership, again, between the Chicago Police Department and CVI. These groups are almost in every single police district, so that they both have an understanding of the role that each of them play to keep our communities safe. But as I've maintained from the very beginning, it's never going to just simply be policing alone. That is a failed strategy. That gets us to where we need to go. Our investments in youth employment and programs, mental health resources, our targeted efforts to deploy city services through block activations, and hiring fairs, which brings and provides jobs and job opportunities to areas impacted by high unemployment and underemployment. These are critical investments that we have to make around policing and CVI. It is the layered, holistic approach that will get us there. Now, finally here, I set a goal last year to get us under 500. That's the goal that I set. But I didn't just set that goal without real substance behind the work that each of us are doing every single day. Every day I roll up my sleeves, and I'm meeting constantly with the superintendent, making sure that we're meeting with the leadership of the police department to really understand how our investments and how our strategic approach is delivering on a promise. But this is just the beginning. There are no magic solutions to this work. It's just hard work. That's what my father would always tell me. Never be afraid to do a little bit of work. Never be intimidated by hard work. And so the block groups, the neighborhood associations, employers, community organizations, mental health professionals, police officers, first responders, and everyone in between, we're all working hard to make our city a much safer place. So my message to the people who are spending tens of millions of dollars to confuse, to distort, to lie, and not just oppose my agenda, but to oppose the desires and aspirations of working people. You're better off spending your dollars to help support driving violence down in the city of Chicago than using those dollars to lie.
Use those millions
We
to
need
change
investments
Chicago
in CVI.
government.
We need more youth employment. We need resources for public safety. If we're going to continue to drive crime down in Chicago, it's going to take all of us. And so those individuals that are forming PACs, that are looking for a conservative to lead this city, you don't have to do that.
Yes, we do.
Spend and use your resources to continue to drive violence down the city of Chicago so that we all can be proud that we are building the safest, most affordable big city in America. Thank you all very much. And with that, we'll take questions. Yep. You know, there's one other note here. I'm sorry. There's one other note that I do want to make. It's important as we talk about the safest, most affordable big city in America. And there's just something that I think it's good to know here, that it's not enough to build the safest city. We also have to build the most affordable one. And I say that all the time. So we're encouraged by a report that came out by Zillow that shows that only in Chicago is the median income more than enough to afford a typical home. The only place in America right now where the median income is enough to be able to afford a home is in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, right.
We have a significant edge on housing affordability. Certainly, we're not saying that this is enough. Of course it's not. We need to go much further so that every Chicagoan can afford to stay and raise their family in the city of Chicago. And we want many more families that have left to come back to our city. In fact, that's how we expand our tax base and solve our structural challenges. You'll see on this slide that this chart shows that in New York, you would need a $100,000 raise to afford a typical mortgage payment. In Los Angeles, you would need a raise by $150,000 to afford a home. In Chicago, a median income can still buy you a typical home in this city. We need to build on that so that we don't become like the other peer cities where it becomes almost impossible for working people to afford Chicago. So again, thank you all again for being here. And with that, we're open to questions.
So now you heard all of that. Do you believe it? Watch how he addresses questions. Like, comment, and share while we wait.
Works.
I think we're good now.
Okay. So yesterday we learned that the unassigned balance was zeroed out in 2024. What impact does that have on the 2025 budget? I know that the city used a portion of the fund balance to help close out, or anticipated using it to close out the 2025 deficit.
Well, if you remember, thank you for that question. You know, the ultimate goal was to ensure that we were making strategic investments to draw down on our legacy debt in Chicago. As you know, the pension debt has grown, over the course of just years of negligence. And so, with that effort, we're already on pace to save taxpayers roughly $3 billion in the long run. As far as our projections moving forward, one of the things that's actually an encouraging spot is that the tax revenue that the city of Chicago controls is performing quite well, right? So the areas in which the city of Chicago has direct oversight of those revenue streams are performing well. It's the ones that we don't have control over. Those are the ones that are state regulated. And so as we look to build on next year's budget, of course, there are, efforts that we're going to all lean into, finding more ways in which we can be productive. Where there's waste, we'll eliminate it. But we do know that we have to grow our economy. And one of the ways in which we do that, of course, is through progressive revenue. That's the ultimate goal, is to make sure that we're not cutting services that people rely upon, particularly at a time in which you can clearly see the investments that I've made are working. We are safer. Our city is more affordable. That's the message that I want to make sure gets across.
But to my question, maybe the acting comptroller can answer what impact on the 2025 budget is closing out 2024 or lowering the fund balance?
Listen, I appreciate that, but again, what I've said repeatedly is that
Testy.
we need to do to move forward. There's an entire effort that we are putting forward. Look, if we would have just been able to get the PPRT from the state of Illinois that we've enjoyed over the course of years, if we'd have just gotten our fair share from state of Illinois, we wouldn't be in this predicament. So, look, there's no secret here that we're going to have to roll up our sleeves. I'm doing that to ensure that our budgets moving forward reflect the values that the people of Chicago elected me to carry out, and that's to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. But
I'm asking a really kind of basic question. Does the city not know? Do you not think people should get this answer? Why can't we answer this question?
It's not that. I didn't realize that my question and my response was that complicated to your basic question.
You hearing this?
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, there's a little bit of confusion about fund balance. So the Accounting Standards Board that specifies how things can be reported, there's a waterfall, right? So there's non-spendable fund balance, which are things like inventories. You can't convert that to cash. There's restricted fund balance, which are things like contracts or grantors. And then there's committed, and that's the city council makes a commitment. And then there's assigned and unassigned. So we ended up with a positive assigned fund balance. And out of that fund balance, we pay the pension payment. We made a dedicated effort to make that prepayment, which is going to save $3 billion. But in addition to that, in that assigned is the $50 million rainy day fund, all right? So that's a backward-looking document. And then the question is, when you're given those results, what do you do looking forward, right? So the mayor appointed, through executive order, a group of business people to scour the city and look for improved processes and savings. We did a contract relief initiative where people are willing to take a lower pay. That's generated about $19 million. And we're actually 4% under budget for the operating budget. So the thing is you do things going forward to try to build that fund balance up. Unassigned is just the residual. It's like after assigned, it's a residual. So keep in mind that the assigned fund balance is something that management has discretion over to do things, and that's still intact. And it's really at the same level that it's been at for several years, notwithstanding the infusion of COVID money. And, we made commitments to spend that money on community revival efforts, economic development efforts. And if you look at our revenue sources that were up last year, they're all economically sensitive. And I think it's a good barometer of the economic health of the city. We had retail sales taxes were up. Entertainment taxes were up. Investment earnings were up. So
I appreciate all that, but do we have an answer?
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. We both offered as thorough as we possibly can, and obviously that was not to your satisfaction, but those are our answers, Justin, okay?
Wow.
Why or why not do you expect NASCAR to come back next year?
Well, first of all, we're just hoping that this year there's good weather. It looks like Saturday we're going to be okay. Sunday is a little iffy, maybe a little cloudy. They're going to have conversations. We're going to have internal conversations. What I can say, though, is, as what I was trying to offer up is that there is real hope in our economy right now. The city of Chicago is the #1 destination for the 4th of July. We're really in the world, by the way.
There's rumor there won't be fireworks and a protest will be occurring.
And what we've seen just in our airports, particularly O'Hare, where we have broken records in terms of just the number of people who are coming through. We are poised to become the busiest space in the country. So there's all good reasons of why people want to bring large events to the city of Chicago, particularly sporting events. We have the Premier League at the end of the month, I believe. It's going to be a great doubleheader. So we're going to continue to have conversations. You all know me. I will sit and meet with anyone, and we'll have those conversations and make a decision.
And you want it to come back?
Well, look, again, it's about having conversations to make sure that we're getting the most out of this experience.
Where are you in the process of selecting a new CHA CEO? How many candidates are you considering right now?
Well, as you know, CHA is an important part of how we deliver on becoming the safest, most affordable big city in America. I'm looking for someone who has real lived experience, someone who understands the value of public housing. It's something that's important to me and my administration. The number of candidates that have come before me, all of them have had, strong backgrounds. But, our situation is quite complex, and there are a number of people who are quite hopeful that as we continue to build more affordable units, that CHA can play a larger part in that. Again, the ones that are in front of me are ones that I will consider strongly, and when I make that announcement, I'll be happy to be able to make sure that you hear as soon as I make that announcement.
I wanted to ask a question regarding the reserves. And the presentation, the slides that were presented yesterday included total reserves and fund balance of just over a little bit over $1 billion. I'm a little confused about what that number represents because according to the ACFR, the total fund balance currently, including assigned as well as unassigned, as you mentioned, is just over $387 million. So can you explain what that $1 billion represents? And then overall, regardless of which metric you're using, it looks like they're declining. So what impact do you think that's going to have on the city's credit rating?
Well, the rating agencies care about all resources, and we presented some of our concessions that are held intact. And so that's where that number comes from, the $300 million plus about $600 million in the concession reserves. We also showed the cash position of the enterprise funds and the net assets, and that's pretty helpful. But the rating agencies care about your total. That number you saw at $300 million, again, is the assigned fund balance.
That's the total fund balance, including assigned and unassigned.
Right. So because the assigned residual was zero, but we still have that $380 million. And again, going forward, we're working towards building that up so that we have the strong assigned and unassigned, which are together things we have discretion over, meaning we want to make the prepayments on pensions. A portion of that, if you want to look at it differently, the $50 million in rainy day is part of assigned, okay? It could very well be part of unassigned, right?
But the overall resources then are still going down from 2023 to 24 from I think it was like 1.3 billion to about just over $1 billion. So overall the resources are going down too. So have you been in touch with the rating firms regarding that decline? Well,
we recently did bond issues, so that's all baked into those. But the spikes you saw have to do with money, one, an improving economy post-COVID, but also some of the COVID funding. And so that was deliberately drawn down. I mean, we have to pay that off, right? We have to expend that money. So it's a little bit artificial. If you go back 2 years, you'll see it's always been around $300 million. Without infusion of money from outside parties, that would still be about $300 million. I would say the assigned fund balance, unassigned, which was 277 the year before, you can look at the numbers of CPS, non-payment, and the PPRT. We would have been in unassigned to the good.
So the pension payment and PPRT that drew that unassigned all the way down to zero.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor.
Hey.
So you went from 2 Craigs 2 weeks ago to no Craigs last week, and you're down to the only Craig left here. I wanted to talk to you, as you're going through this budget process, and you had the meeting last night, and You're talking about wanting to keep the city affordable. I'm wondering, and I imagine others are as well, with this kind of budget deficit, where do you stand at this early stage on taking the automatic property tax increase in order to try to bring the budget into balance?
Well, where I stand today is that there are a number of recommendations that are coming from City Council, particularly around revenue. There will be recommendations that will be put forward by community members. We obviously have this working group that they're working hard every single day to look at ways in which we can be far more innovative in our budget. So we haven't made a determination just yet on, which revenue streams will we ultimately rely upon. But I can tell you this, that, we as a city, and quite frankly as a state, as a party, have to do much better in terms of raising progressive revenue to address these critical needs that people have. It'd be different if our work wasn't working. But the fact of the matter is we put $100 million the last couple of years towards violence prevention. It's working. Making sure that our detective division is strengthened, as well as having more an innovative approach towards solving crimes. It's working. Hiring young people, 45% increase, 29,000 this summer. These investments are working. So I'm eager to receive these recommendations from City Council. And look, here's what people said that they wanted. They wanted more engagement. They wanted a more hands-on experience on the front end. We're providing people with that. I'm going to present a budget in a couple of months that I believe will reflect the values of the people of Chicago. And then, of course, City Council will have the responsibility to pass it.
Do you believe that you could present a budget that would not include a property tax hike?
Look, that's a fair question. Look, there's no secret here that there has been a great deal of consternation around the property taxes as a whole across the state of Illinois. Here's what my preference has always been, is to work hand in hand with City Council in the state of Illinois to find more progressive streams of revenue. Look, the president he's a very simple-minded man.
More insults.
But his awful bill that he just got passed, we're going to see cuts to food and Medicaid and education.
Misinformation.
And these are real severe consequences to the neighborhoods in which we know require more. So we're going to continue to roll our sleeves up. Craig, I can, tell you the honest truth here. We're going to do everything in our power to find ways in which government can be more productive. But I'm grateful, and I should say I'm grateful that our working group, working with labor, business leaders, civic leaders, the philanthropic community, all of us rolling up our sleeves to address, the legacy debt that I've inherited, and
wanted
just
inheritance.
Can't keep kicking the can down the road. So it's approached my front door. We have to address it, and we're seeing unprecedented numbers of violence reduction. I believe in the month of June alone, we cut homicides in half. We cut the homicides in the month of June in half. And it's because we're actually doing the hard work. So the work is working. Now we have to have a budget that continues to build off of the success that we are experiencing.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Last week, interim CPS CEO King said that the deficit's going to actually rise by about $200 million to over $700 million. And then she announced some layoffs and eliminations of jobs at CPS. The ProPublica and Chalkbeat investigation last month showed that about 150 schools were half empty. Is it time to start talking about possible plans for consolidation or closing when the moratorium drops in 2027?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful that we have a CEO that is willing to tell the truth.
Truth?
Of what the real number is, and that the layoffs that took place were layoffs that she essentially inherited.
Again,
and she's
wanted
inherited
inheritance.
a great deal of challenge there. She's got 30 years of experience, Dr. King does. So I feel confident about her effort as a public school teacher, 12 years, a principal, I believe, as well, for about 18 years, roughly. I trust her judgment. As far as what our conversations need to be about, or what our conversations need to consist of moving forward, the conversations really have to be about what our families and our children deserve. That's the only conversation we should be having. And quite frankly, it's been a long time since we've actually been able to have substantive conversations around what working people want in this city. For decades, we've talked about cuts and closures, these consolidations and these so-called efficiencies. Guess where we are? We're in a worse condition than when it was done, over 10 years ago. So the conversation moving forward has to be about, again, how the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago can work together to make sure that all of our districts are fully funded. No one disagrees that there's been some progress, but no one disagrees that more needs to be done at the state level. Everybody knows that. People want better schools. They want better resource schools. As population continues to grow in our city, and it will continue to grow, it's going to be imperative that we make critical investments today so that our young people are not constantly being undermined simply because of the failures of the past. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we do right by the people of this city. As someone who sends their kids to the public schools, who taught in our public schools, I can tell you exactly what families want to talk about. They want to talk about insurance, small class sizes. They don't want to have conversations about, again, cuts and closures and things being taken away from them.
As someone whose children are fourth-generation CPS grads, I understand that. But the experts I talk to say that this is a discussion, including people on the board, this is a discussion that if you have in advance and if you do carefully, it will be a much, let's say, kinder plan than something done in crisis mode. So are you saying you will not have those conversations?
Well, what I'm saying is if the conversation around taking things away from children is a kind conversation, there was a conversation about that a decade ago around that same premise. And what did it get us? Did it get us any better results? The answer is emphatically no. And so what I'm simply saying is we're going to have a conversation about how we build on our school district. That's the most important conversation. And I can tell you about generations, particularly of black folks who have been stuffed in Willis wagons, where black educators have been fired, where there's been a direct undermining of even black history that's coming from the President of the United States of America. So there's a long history in the city of Chicago where black families in particular have been ignored. Let's not do that anymore. I think that's just an appropriate way to move forward. Let's have a conversation about what people need. Let's do that. And I think as we have conversations about what people need, then we can find a pathway to ensure that our district is showing up for working people.
Thanks,
Thank you
Monica.
for those questions.
Thanks, Monica. Yep, we'll go to Mark. Thanks.
If it's not, just let me
Okay, at the last press availability, you said that you wanted to create safe spaces that were welcoming for these barbarian, that's the only word I can come up with, kids that are teen and older that are perpetrating these teen trend takeovers. Well, the day after you vetoed the SNAP curfew, there was a resurgence of a teen trend action in Maple Park subdivision of West Pullman. And without going into all the gory details, some of the gory highlights included pellet guns mixed with water guns, and I believe she was 7 or 8-year-old girl being missing for 2 hours because she was hiding in her mother's car because she was so traumatized by that. So the neighbors, and then I'm getting to the question.
We got to get to the question.
Give me a chance. So the neighbors in that community want to know what you are going to do as far as creating safe spaces for them and their children in their community.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mark. It's important. Look, we're working hard. I'm going to pass it over to our deputy mayor. Oh, he had to leave to the hearing, sorry. But we are working hard to prevent these large gatherings from taking place. As we've said repeatedly, that in many instances of these large gatherings, the vast majority of the arrests have been adults. So, the characterization of large gatherings automatically meaning teens, I just want to level set that we're not speaking something that is not entirely accurate. As far as creating more safe spaces, absolutely. We have a number of them that are being organized for the month of July and really throughout the year. My advisory council, youth advisory council, they're taking the lead on that. Now, look, do we need more spaces? Absolutely. Mark, I'll be the first to tell you that. That's why this conversation around the budget, even around Chicago Public Schools, is so critical. right? Because everyone wants to have a conversation about what we take away from people. I'm saying let's have a conversation about what we can actually add, particularly add value. That's the responsible thing to do. Now, look, we're all adults in this room. At some point, I've proven for the last couple of years I can make difficult decisions. I'm just saying that the way decisions were made prior to me arriving have always been about reduction and eliminating, and that has proven to be wrong. Now, look, if you look after what we've done for the first 2 years in office, there's a reason why violence is going down in the city of Chicago, is because we're doing the things that work. I promised a safe, affordable city. There's a lot more work to be done, but that includes creating more spaces in neighborhoods where people can go and hang out and feel safe. And that's going to require some investments, and we're looking forward to the budgetary process that will help speak to those desires to encourage and increase more safe, activated spaces.
Well, before I get to the next question, that investment in that community is going to require the expansion of that field house, which they've been trying to get expanded for 59 years.
I heard loud and clear. All right, next question, loud and clear. That's good advocacy. I hear you.
I'm just telling you.
I've been.
The neighbors are like, if you don't create a safe space for us in that neighborhood, we're going to use something to create an unsafe space for
Gotcha.
the people and dissuade them.
Understood.
So next question. So the feedback on the Reparations Commission or committee or whatever is that it doesn't really address the needs of FBAs and only for FBAs. It comes off as more of trickle-down voodoo economics 2.0. So what is your plan, or do you even have a plan to address specifically descendants, creating wealth for descendants of chattel slaves
Well,
who came in between 1619 and the 13th Amendment?
Well, this is the plan, right? The first thing that we had to do was to make sure that we put dollars behind the institution of reparations. No other mayor has ever done that. But here, just keep this.
Directly into their pockets.
Mark, if you're going to ask the question, give me an opportunity to answer it, okay? So the first thing that we had to do was to make sure that we have a collective task force. It is not the responsibility of one individual to determine how we respond to decades of oppression. Those are dictators. I'm saying that we are giving the community control to be able to help direct how government should show up. This is not Mayor Brandon Johnson telling people how we have to spend money to address historic disinvestment. That would be wrong, and I'm not going to do that. And so this task force, which actually has resources behind it, that's one element. The $1.25 billion bond investment that is going to repair the south and west sides of the city of Chicago as we create owner-occupied generational wealth building occupancy of the spaces that have been neglected. It's also about making sure that we're investing in our young people. It's also about making sure that we're creating more opportunities for mental health and behavioral health services. It's about jobs as well. But this is the first step in terms of this task force. Now, what I will say is that we've already put $4 million, an additional $4 million down towards wealth building and making sure that community organizations control those dollars. Now, look, if you expect me, after 400 years of disinvestment in this country of black folks, to be able to turn that around in 2 years, you know good and well that no one individual can turn that historical disinvestment around in 2 years. But what I can tell you is I'm the first mayor to actually put forth real money towards it. Nobody else can speak to that. In fact, we are leading the way in the country at a time in which this president is looking to undermine diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really an attack on black labor. We are standing firmly. We're not scared, we're not intimidated, we're not afraid, but it's going to take all of us in this room, all over the city of Chicago, to have a real commitment to making sure that we are addressing the west and south sides of Chicago where schools have been closed, public housing has been shut down, jobs have been lost, where violence has been pervasive. There's a reason why we are moving towards a safer, more affordable city. It's because we're actually putting our money where our mouth is. Now, there's more work to be done, and that's why I'm calling for the ultra-rich in this state to pay their fair share in taxes and fact, it is well past time that Democrats actually stand up for working people to put money behind within these communities. And we have not seen that. We've seen austere budgets. We've seen cuts. We're seeing more people say reduce services in our schools, reduce services in our housing, do not hire as many people, cut government at a time in which people are expecting government to do more and to do better. Well, guess what I'm doing? I'm doing more and I'm doing better, because we're going to build the safest, most affordable big city in America, whether anyone likes it or not. But I know the people who trust me in this position appreciate those investments.
The FDA say that there needs to be less studying.
Thank you, Mayor.
Paying up in their pockets.
Got it.
And their pockets alone.
All right, thank you.
Address the behavior.
Mayor, the governor has selected his running mate, Christian Mitchell. Any thoughts about him, his Chicago ties? Are you hopeful that maybe he'll be able to help you in Springfield, making the argument for more funding for the city?
Well, we're certainly going to, well, first of all, that's the decision of the governor, and that's his prerogative. I mean, obviously, as mayor of the city of Chicago, I'm focused on, what I have to do as far as, the role that everyone has to play to ensure that Springfield is showing up for Chicagoans. We need every and all voices to do that. And, it's one of those, we're in one of those historic moments where all over the country, where there are real bona fide legitimate threats that are coming from the federal government, where we control the House of Representatives, we control the state Senate, we have the governor's mansion, we have Cook County, the city of Chicago. There really are no excuses, quite frankly, for us as leaders in the city and throughout the state of Illinois. And I'm hopeful, right, as clearly a generation of leaders are rising up all over the country that speak directly to the needs of working people. So I'm always going to remain optimistic about our opportunities in Springfield to ensure that we are making good on our promise to build the safest, most affordable big city in America.
If I can just ask one more question.
Sure, of course.
The Trump Tower Chicago has agreed to comply with the Clean Water Act and to pay a record $4.8 million settlement for years of environmental violations. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's, first of all, let me just say, my work to ensure that we have environmental justice is something that is a major priority of mine. We reinstituted the Department of the Environment, and it's being led by a remarkable individual, Angela Tovar. Our Department of Law, Mayor Richardson and Laura, have been working hard to hold all people accountable. So, look, the judgment is one thing, but I just want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear. This is really about long-term sustainability, and we have to have corporate leaders around the city of Chicago committed to ensuring that long-term sustainability for our environment is not just in place, but it's sustained. So thank you for that question.
Mayor Johnson, your name has become a cautionary tale and a punchline nationally. People are saying that if Zohran Mamdani is elected mayor of New York, that New York will become like Johnson's Chicago.
Which is what one of the safest, most affordable big cities in America?
Well,
that's not a bad thing. And just for the record, get this message to Zohran.
Okay.
If he's a Mets fan, the Cubbies are coming for him. All right?
All right. Well, unfortunately,
you don't know if he's a Mets fan or not.
I really don't care if he's a Mets fan or not. What I care about is the fact that Chicago has a $1 billion budget gap, migrant-driven budget gap. That your policy, your plan to have a government-run grocery store has collapsed, and you're at a 6% approval rating currently. So, what do you say?
It's time for the question.
What do you say to these people around the country who are saying that essentially your policies are a blueprint for how to destroy a major American city? And what do you think Zohran's approval rating will be if he institutes your policies?
So perhaps you were dozing off during my presentation, which that has happened when I was a teacher. So I'm not even offended by it that you fell asleep during my presentation. But I will ask you to work a little bit harder to stay awake during class, because otherwise you're going to miss the important information. So there's a 30% reduction in homicides. In fact, even though there's a national trend, the city of Chicago is ahead of other major cities when it comes to the reduction of violence in the city of Chicago. So it's working. In terms of affordability, we are one of the most affordable big cities in the entire country, right? And so the numbers bear out. And so here's what I'm encouraging everyone to do. Let's continue to organize and work hard to ensure that we have elected leaders that understand the value of supporting working people. We're going to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. I made a commitment to that, and we're going to continue to hold to that commitment.
Thanks.
Real
We'll go to Heather.
Chicagoans tell me that you sound delusional when you say that.
Okay, we're going to go to Heather now. Thanks.
No, I'm sorry, but
Thanks.
everybody got a follow-up. I'm going to ask my follow-up question, okay? Every single.
No
I'm
preamble.
sorry, Aaron, but I do get to have a follow-up, okay?
No preamble, just a question.
Every other reporter got a follow-up question.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask the question.
The real Chicagoans say that you sound delusional when you say that your policies are working. Your government-run
All right, we're going to go to Heather now.
collapsed.
Thank you.
You want to raise taxes on groceries. No self-respecting socialist would do that. I mean, obviously, a grocery tax is a tax.
Hey, we need to keep moving. Thanks.
What do you say to real Chicagoans who are not happy with your policies?
Thanks.
Go Cubs.
That was professional.
We'll go to Heather now. Thanks.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi. Do you know if he's a Mets fan?
He is a Mets fan.
Okay, so now game on.
Okay.
Game on, Chicago.
The ACFR yesterday revealed that the Chicago Police Department overspent its budget by $207 million, nearly 10% more than its $2 billion budget. Who is responsible for that overspending, and is it acceptable?
No, it's not acceptable. Look, no one is going to agree that the overspending in this moment is something that we should accept or be okay with. Look, I've had conversations with the superintendent along with our budget director, and to the credit of the hard work collectively, we have seen overtime hours come down significantly. They have. Now, again, you know, between the large-scale events as well as with DNC, there are some expenses that we accumulated. In fact, there are a number of events that we hold throughout the year that people want to experience where the city of Chicago is often left with the bill. So there are some innovative element that has to take place here, and I've spoken to the superintendent about ways in which we can be far more aggressive and in reducing overtime. And like I said, the hours have come down, so we're heading in the right direction. You know, salaries have, of course, increased as we have, you know, paid our women and men who serve our city on the front lines. We want to pay them a good wage. So there's more work to be done, but it's not acceptable, and we're going to continue to work to drive those numbers down.
As the presser is coming to a close, and this is your first time watching the interaction of this elected mayor, you had an opportunity to see how he conducts business and also criticism of his performance in Chicago. Let us know your thoughts. And do you see him as Chicago's repeated mayor again in 2027? Spread the news, like, and comment. For more updates, hit the all subscribe button.